Hey, what's going on, traders? Happy Monday. Thank you guys so much for tuning back into the channel. I hope you guys all had an amazing Thanksgiving last week. And as usual, I'm going to go ahead and jump into today's recap. But I did want to make a quick disclaimer, right? As you guys can tell from the top of the screen, I am still trading on a simulation account. So I am going to be trading on a simulation account all week. So for all of you who don't know what that is, I'm just not going to be using real money, right? This is a paper trading account. So I did want to make you guys aware of that. But in terms of how I did today, right, what you guys will notice is that I actually was able to walk away with a profit today. I was up about $175 on SQQQ, and I did take a $97 loss on TQQQ, right? And there are two additional positions, right, that you guys will see, LCID and RIVN, which are the ticker symbols for the electric car companies Lucid and Rivian. And the reason why that's showing there is I wanted to actually buy some shares of them in my main account, but I accidentally bought it on this paper simulation account and decided to sell out right once I noticed my mistake. But that is why they are popping up there, so you guys can't ignore that. And so these were my field orders, right? You guys can see I started trading at 6:36, right? And didn't stop till about 10:15. So I didn't trade for the longest today, right? Compared to, how long I normally do, but let's jump right into today's recap and let you guys know exactly what was going on in my mind, right? But as we started to approach market open, right? All of pre-market, I noticed that at least for me, I didn't feel like there was a very clear direction, right? This thing tried to approach top VWAP, got rejected, sold off to bottom VWAP, found a support, bounced, and then it's just started to uptrend, right? And make these higher lows and higher highs, right? And ultimately at market open, I wasn't really sure where we were going to be headed, but as we see, right, the increase in volume ultimately ended up, driving the price of the Nasdaq future up, right? And so with the momentum, we saw this thing start to climb, right? And so I decided to get into TQQQ, right? And I was actually profiting on this uptrend here, right? It did have a few pullbacks where it did fake me out a bit, but I ultimately continued to ride the momentum up. And what ended up happening? Well, this thing got rejected, as you guys can tell, and started to change direction. So once this thing did start to sell off, I did give back a lot of the profit that I did make on the way up, unfortunately, right? And as this thing would start to bounce, I would get back into TQQQ only for this thing to sell off and for me to lose more money, right? Then ultimately on this last bounce here, we did see this thing start to bounce and try to recover. And I got into TQQQ again, only for this thing to sell off, right? And actually break the previous support. So I unfortunately gave back all the profit I made in the morning, and I actually took a loss on top of that, right? So that's why you guys will notice I was down $97 on TQQQ, right? So not only did I give back all my profit, but I lost $100 on top of that. But as soon as it broke the previous support that it had here, right, in my eyes, I felt like there was going to be lots of selling pressure. So I switched on over to focus on the inverse ETF of the NASDAQ SQQQ, right? I got into it as this thing started to sell off. I added to my position and I did a good job of capitalizing on this sell off, right? But what ended up happening, this thing found a support. I ended up giving back some profit, right? And this thing started to trade choppy, right? It would break above the EMA, break below it, then it'd find a support where it previously did, right? And start to break above it again, then break below it, then break above it. So it was very inconsistent during this time period, right? But ultimately, as I was able to profit off this sell-off, I did start to give back profit during this choppiness, right? And so as we did head out, over here to right about 9 o'clock on the day, I was down about $50 on the day. And the reason for that was I did lose $100 on TQQQ, right? I first profited, then lost it, right? And then lost $100 on it. Then I made money on the sell off, gave some back. So by the time it hit this area, I was only, up about $40 on SQQQ, leaving me at about $50 down on the day. This thing sold off, right? I was able to ride this thing down, reduce position here. This thing completely 180'd, right? I ended up giving back profit because I was still in with some shares and it changed direction, but this thing got rejected, started to pull on back again, and I got back into the inverse ETF, right? And then I decided to actually, try to play it risky and I was waiting for a break below this support, right? It was establishing a strong support around this area, but once I saw this big movement, I thought we were going to see this thing finally break support, right? But that's not what ended up happening. So I was fully averaged in. this thing found a support and ended up changing direction again. So I went from being green on the day to red after this thing ended up happening. And then as this thing started to sell off, I got back in, right, fully with my full position size, wrote this thing down. And what ended up happening? Well, I decided to play it safe this time because I learned my lesson from last time, right? And I decided once I saw this thing start to form a support here, right, to cut my shares. And so that's where I decided to, cut my trade and stop trading. But what ended up happening? Well, what I thought would happen ended up happening, right? So this thing ended up selling off aggressively. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to take part in any of it, but that's okay because I was just glad with the fact that, I was able to walk away with some profit on the day after giving back, what I made in the morning. And then, just the fact that it was so choppy and then I was still able to walk away with profit. I was still just pretty happy with that, overall. So that's why I decided to call it. But in terms of where the Nasdaq's at overall, right, we can see that it is more oversold, right? We have pulled on back quite a bit, but that doesn't mean that we have to, find a bottom here. For all we know, the Nasdaq could continue to sell off. But I did want to make you guys aware that I have been starting to take some swing positions into a lot of tech stocks, right? Because I feel that at these prices, even though the Nasdaq can continue to sell off, I personally feel like at these prices, lots of these top tech stocks are at pretty good deals, right? And so, for example, I decided to pick up some Rivian, which is an electric car company, right? And the reason for that is I did notice that, long term, they have been losing a lot of money in terms of their stock value, right, the past year and a half. And so right now we are trading at about $30 a share, right? Or just under $29. And it has traded at a price point of $180. Doesn't mean it even has to go anywhere near that, but the potential upside to towards the downside I feel is worth it in my eyes, right? Even if this thing were to recover to $100, right? Just the fact that it's at almost $30 a share, right? That would be a really nice recovery. So I felt that it was in my best interest to, rather than have one like, some money sitting just cash somewhere, I'd rather invest it in companies that have lots of upside and potential, right? And, that can do big things in the future. So that's why I personally would just rather have my money sitting in these tech stocks that are now oversold, right? Big picture, than just have my money cash, right? And so the other stock that I did invest in is Lucid. This thing follows a similar pattern. It has traded at lows of 960. We are currently at 985, and I got in around $10 a share, right? If this thing were to approach previous resistance levels at around $60 a share, that would be a pretty nice return, right? So I am excited for the future, even if we do end up selling off, for the Nasdaq. That would mean that those stocks would only get cheaper in long term. It would offer just that much more of, an upside and benefit for us. But that's ultimately I did want to talk about everything I did want to mention in today's video. I do want to thank you guys so much again for your time. If you guys have any questions at all, go ahead and drop a comment and I will be more than happy to answer it and even make a video on it. But that's pretty much everything. I want to thank you guys so much again for taking the time out of your day to go ahead and watch this video, and I will see you guys tomorrow in my recap for tomorrow. But see you guys then. Take care. Have a good rest of your day.